Yesterday was pretty unlucky day. Just 4 hours after I released an updated version of my Cast on Freeze build guide, all trigger skills got nerfed, including Cast on Freeze. The way it works now is Cast on Freeze, instead of generating 100 energy per freeze, now generates 10 per power. But what does that mean? Well, basically against normal monsters it generates 10 energy, against magic 20, rares 50 and bosses 200. On top of that, for Cast on Freeze to be able to proc Comet, now it needs 300 energy instead of 166, which is basically double the amount. Overall, what this nerf means is that we will still proc Comet on rares and bosses fairly often, but on white monsters, so during clear, we will barely ever see it. This means that I had to come up with solutions for both the endgame and leveling for the Stormweaver. Fortunately, I am not the only one out there with the same issue. So there are other content creators and even non-content creators that have been playing similar or completely different Stormweaver builds that survived the nerf. So in today's video I want to go over my solution and some of the other content creators, so you have a variety of builds to choose from. But be warned, if you are expecting the Cast on Freeze nerf to be fully fixed after this, forget about it, these days are long gone. All of the fixes that I'm going to show you today work, but the build is nowhere close to what it was. But first let's start with leveling, so what you should do if you still haven't finished the campaign. So the first thing you can do in terms of leveling is you can check out the Goratha's Blood Mage Firebolt leveling guide. And it is meant for Blood Mage, but to be honest, it works perfectly fine for the Stormweaver. The only thing that you would change is the Ascendancy, so you would go for the Exposure and then for the Arcane Surge. That's basically it. So it should work perfectly fine. And the second thing you can do is, yesterday I was actually leveling this character from level 1 to 42 just to test out the new leveling way for the cold spells. So I reached level 42, that's because at that point you do get comments, so I want to see how it is after the nerfs. So the way I would recommend to level up now is through the cold snap. So you basically continue just as you were earlier, so in Act 3, and you just cast your Frostbolt and you detonate it with the Cold Snap. And yes, I know it's not as good as it was, but it works perfectly fine, and after testing it with the Frostwall and Fireball, I think they are fairly similar. And just to show you how it works, and you're still going to cast the Comets occasionally, especially against rares and bosses. So here you can see damage is actually pretty good. I can kill all of the regular monsters pretty easily. And here at the top you can see how the Comet is still building up. It's nowhere close to what it was, but it's still slowly building up, and occasionally you're gonna have some, well, additional Comets. And we are still able to use the Comet just to self-cast. I can't use it right now because I don't have additional skill gem, but it still is going to help us with some boss DPS. And especially against bosses, this build is still perfectly fine because we have Frostwall. So Frostwall here, just to show you on the rare. Unfortunately, I just lost all of my Frostwalls before I casted the Exposure. And here you can see the Comet still gets the job done, but we are still pretty squishy, so you're gonna die occasionally. I was just focusing on dealing as much damage as possible, and this was the Cast on Death Chaos Explosion, which is, by the way, one of the worst modifiers you can get on a rare in the game. But yeah, this build works. It's not as good as it was, but it should get you to the end game. And if you want a written version of the guide, you can check out my max roll guide, where I updated the Cast on Freeze Comet into the Cold Snap Frostbolt leveling guide. And here you can see all of the new skills progression. So you can see the Cold Snap, and now we are using Cast on Freeze and Cold Snap. Now let's have a look at the endgame version. And this is a version that I tested yesterday, and the goal of this one was that if you don't have any gold to respec or to buy any gear, you can just do this, what I just did here, and this should get you through just some low tier maps, so you can farm some gold or currency, so you can eventually swap into something else. Or you can continue playing this if you actually like it, because it's actually not that bad. I just think it would require a high amount of investment to make it work properly. And the way it works is we are using just multiple Cast on Freeze setups. So if just one Cast on Freeze doesn't proc that often, well, if we use multiple of them, well, that should fix the build. So exactly that was my idea. But how do we do that? Well, first of all, you need a lot of spirit. So how do I do it? In my offhand, instead of using a focus, now I am using a scepter, which gives me around 200 spirit. I actually don't even need that good of a scepter. I still have 90 spirit left, so you can go to the PoE2 trade and you can search here for at least 150 spirit, and you can see that there's a bunch of scepters posted for 1 exalt, so you can just buy one of these. On top of that, you still need some spirit on amulet or chest, or you can just get better scepter and then you don't need this much spirit, or you can just remove one of the cast on freeze, it doesn't matter that much. And in terms of the support, well, all you need is just any damage. To be honest, I was running out of support with so many cast on freeze setups. You don't have that many damaging supports. So what I did is on the first one is Comet with Spell Echo and Impetus. Second one is Cold Snap. You can go full Comets or full Cold Snap. I tested a bunch of different setups just with Comets, just with Cold Snaps, and to be honest, it doesn't really matter too much. For some people have been telling me that they tested Cold Snap, it for them it was better. For some people Comet was better. For me, actually going full Comet was better. I probably should also replace this Cold Snap with Comet. So again, Comet with Spell Echo Impetus. Here Inevitable Crit with Energy Retention, and especially for Inevitable Crit I should be using a Comet. So actually let's swap it out. Called Mastery Energy Retention, Comet with Inevitable Crit and Considered Casting here, Inspiration with Rising Tempest, here we have one with Biting Frost and Elemental Focus, and that one actually is Elemental Invocation, because I still like to have one that I can just cast occasionally whenever I want to cast it. And then we have Frostwall, the same setup with Spell Cascade Icicle and Ingenuity for some cooldown recovery, and Frostbolt for Magnified Effect and Strip Away. And that's basically the whole setup. And for the activation of freeze, I'm using Frostbolt with Scattershot, Glaciation, Arcane Tempo, and Cold Snap with Unleash, Control Destruction, and Concentrate Effect. And you can still use with Call of the Brotherhood Spark, but to be honest, with this setup, I found that Frostbolt actually looked better. So here, let me show you the map. This is, I believe, tier 5 map, so this is actually the tier of maps that I was doing before the nerf, because I didn't have that much damage. And as you can see, I'm not clearing like crazy fast, but also the build just works. It is a little bit rough on mana because we are casting still quite a lot of comets. And my defense is not the best because a lot of these swamps that I did reduced my resistances. Like my offhand actually gave me a lot of resist, so now I am a bit less tanky. But yeah, the setup just works. It's not gonna be the best. If I actually had decent amount of currency, I would test it properly with adding more 5-link. You can actually even add more comets into the same link, so you can also test something with that. And yeah, I think with proper investment, actually thinking about the build more, I think this could work in the like actual endgame once you have a proper 6 links and gear with damage. And I probably would eventually remove the scepter, so I would have maybe 2 or 3 cast on freeze setups, or maybe 2 or 3 invocation, because invocation actually generates more energy. If we look at the energy that it generates, it says for freeze you generate 12, and you still generate some for ignites and shock. So if you are igniting and shocking, you generate even more. But the issue with going for multiple elemental invocation is that you have to press the button. So imagine having 3 different comet buttons and having to press them like every pack of monster. That would be kind of annoying, so I wouldn't recommend really doing that. But yeah, here is the build. Kinda works, kinda doesn't. It's a bit random, I'm not gonna lie. Some maps it actually feels pretty fine, some maps it feels horrible. So yeah, that's my first suggestion. And my second suggestion is Goratha's Fireball Frostwall. So this is a continuation of the leveling guide that I showed you earlier, and you can still just use it in the endgame. Most of the damage comes from Firebolt and Frostwall, so you don't care too much about cast on freeze. You can actually even add cast on freeze here. I believe he is still testing it, so if you want to see his version, make sure to check out his YouTube. I'm gonna link it in the description, and if you're wondering how the build looks like, this is how it looks like. But again, this is on a Blood Mage, so if you want to see the Stormweaver version, Tenki also made a video, and he swapped to the same build, so you can see it still works, and he is playing it as a Stormweaver. This is a map with not that many monsters, so you can see clear that well, but yeah, it still kind of works. He's still using a Comet on Cast on Freeze, so it works. Now the next build comes from not a content creator, but from someone in my chat. His name is Fire Effects, and he's playing Cast on Freeze Archmage. And this is actually a version that I was thinking about swapping into later on before the nerfs. So apparently it still works. He was saying that he still clears tier 15 maps. He has some issues with clear, so the build is not as fast. So like everyone after the nerfs struggles with clearing monsters, but on rares and bosses it still works perfectly fine. It's just kinda slow. So the way it works is you just scale like a regular Archmage, and if you don't know what Archmage is, it's aura, it reserves 100 spirit and it gives you damage per mana. So we are basically mana stacking, and you proc some Cast on Freeze comets and Winter. I guess he's still testing some stuff, so this setup is probably still not perfect, but that's what he was using at this point. You can also throw in your spin on it. You can use multiple comets like I was. You can maybe test Cold Snap, and this is the planner that I got leaked by him. And my last suggestion comes from CaptainLance, and I saved it for last because it has nothing to do with Cast on Freeze, so that's why it survived the nerf, but it still works. It's perfectly fine. It just plays completely different. So I want to give you a suggestion for something that plays fairly similar first, but if you want to just swap for something completely different, and that would be the build I would go for. And this is basically Spark Archmage, so just scale as much mana as possible. Archmage gives you lightning damage, and you just deal crazy amount of damage with Spark. And if you want to see the build progression, CaptainLance is making daily video updates, so you can see how the build plays on his YouTube. I am also gonna link it in the description. And if you are wondering what I am going to do, I am probably gonna stick for a bit with this version of the build, so just Cast on Freeze, because I don't have that much currency, so I cannot really buy that many items. So I'm gonna farm with this a little bit, and then I'm going to swap to the Tankies or Goratha's version of Frostwall with Fireball, because this one actually looks so far the smoothest and the one that kinda dodged the nerf, and it's still doing damage with Cast on Freeze, but if you are not freezing stuff and you're not proccing Comet, it still does pretty good damage with just Fireball and Frostwall. But my end goal is still going to be make a full-on automated Cast on Freeze build, and I still think it does exist somewhere out there, but I think now it's gonna require a good amount of investment, and it is going to include using multiple Cast on Freezes stuff, and doing that probably without a scepter, so you can actually get some additional damage from your offhand, and also possibly some special uniques or maybe just some overall better gear, and especially 5 and even 6 links. That's my biggest issue with my current build right now. I don't have any even 5 links, so I am doing pretty low damage even in the yellow maps. So hopefully I gave you a few choices and you will find something to play for yourself. Of course, you can play something different if you want to. You don't have to stick with Sorceress if you don't mind the re-leveling a new character. And hopefully we will no longer get any additional nerfs for this build. But that's gonna be it for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.